All right, welcome back. This is going to be the second part of our little series on running the statistical analysis portion of the term project. So for this part, what we're going to be doing is actually getting the CSV file that we made in the first part of the video. If you're unsure of what we're doing here, please go check that video out. And we're going to be actually putting it into Stata and running our statistical analyses. So two things that you should have before we do this part of the project is one, make sure that your CSV file is properly formatted. If you're unsure how to properly format it, like I said, go back to the first part of this video, and then after you're done with that, revisit here. The second thing is you want to have the factor analysis example for lab do file. This should be provided for you under the content tab in Learning Suite. If you can't find it, contact your TA and they'll be able to troubleshoot that for you. But in my case, I have it synced up here in Psych Stats, do files, and here. This is my do file. So once we have all of those synced up to our BYU box account, that's another thing. You should have a box account for BYU. You should be able to load this all into Stata. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to byucloudapps.com, log in with your net ID and your password, and make sure that box is synced up to those cloud apps with your BYU account, and then we're going to open Stata. Now, this can take a little bit of time to actually load. In my case, I just finished recording a practice version of this video, so I don't have to wait as long. But in your case, if you're loading up for the first time, it can take a while. So please be patient with the process, but once it gets going, it gets going. So in this case, I have my table here. I'm going to open it up halfway so that it takes up half the window. The rest of it, I'm going to open with my, excuse me, I'm going to make sure that I can see my do file here. So I'm going to click on open, and it already has it open for me, but pretty much you should be able to see your box account synced up to Stata, and you're going to find wherever you saved your factor analysis do file. So you're going to open up that, and boom, it opens up there for you. Oh, excuse me. I have a little bad cough. All right. So now, Stata actually isn't readily, how do I say this? It doesn't usually read CSV files as its primary data format. It usually looks at DTA formats. So in order to actually import our CSV file that we made in the first part of the video series, we're going to have to click on File at the very top here, click on Import, and then look for text data and in parentheses delimited CSV. So we're going to click on that, and it's going to open up a new window. And here we're just going to click on the folder on the right. And like I said, you should have access to your box account, and boom, I have it right here. Cool. And so it's going to check, like, is this the format that you really want? If it's red, that means it's a character string. And so it's actually not going to be able to it's not going to be able to run numbers with. So if your numbers are red, that means that Stata is actually recognizing that as a string. And that's a problem you should troubleshoot with your TA. But in my case, all my data is fine. And so I'm just going to click on OK. Right. And now you can see here the variables is filled with all of the columns that we made in the first part of the series. So in this case, you can see that what tab is going to do, it's going to give you the frequencies of a nominal variable. So for sex, it's considered nominal. So if I were to, type that in, tab sex, boom, it's going to give me 33% of the participants in my study were male, 64 were female, and 1.77 preferred not to say what they identified as. These are things that you do have to report in your method section, so this isn't negligible. This is something you do need to have. I can also summarize age, but what that's going to give me is the average age of the person who took my test and the standard deviation. Like I said before, these are things you do have to report. Now here comes the interesting part. I think when you download the do file, it will have a bunch of random words. I can't remember what they said, but they're, I think, pertaining to emotions and music, that sort of thing. That was when Sally was the TA, and she was doing her dissertation on how music affects emotions. And she was specifically looking at musicians. Either way, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to replace all these items with our own. And to do that, the easiest way is what we're going to do is we're going to click on here. And once I click on an item or a variable up here, notice how in the command box it pops up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually double click all of these. So then that way they all show up nicely in the command box. And once I'm done with that, I am going to select them. Oops. I'm going to copy them. Just click on got it. And I'm actually going to replace all the items with this. So in this case, I'm just going to paste that on. I just did Control V, and it should say uh, where you should paste these items. But in this case, I'm going to paste it right after PW core, but before the column that specifies start. So here, paste it there. Same thing with alpha. So right after alpha, but right before the first comma, paste it right there. And same thing with factor analysis. And then for the last line, it's going to be right after factor, but before the comma, and which is followed by factor, and then in parentheses. Cool. So that's actually now prepped for us to run our analysis. One last thing that we need to do is reverse score our items. If you recall from the last part, we made sure that we identified which items need to be reverse scored. And we used that, well, we did that by using the suffix reverse. So I'm going to use the same method that I did with all my items, but just for the reverse. So I'm going to click on reverse, 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 reverse. And there you go. You have all your items that need to be reverse scored. You copy that, and right after codebook, it should say recode var reverse or something like that. And I'm gonna replace var reverse with my items, and I should be good to go. One last thing though is I need to rewrite this whole line because I'm using a 5-point scale in which neutral is an option. In this case, Sally used a Likert scale that pretty much forced their participants to choose between whether or not they disagreed or agreed with a certain statement. And that would be using a 4-point scale. So if we want to, well, if your specific test has only 4 points, you're totally fine and you're actually good to run this line. But in my case, since I had 5 points, I'm going to have to rewrite this. So in this case, I'm going to say 1 is equal to 5, 2 is equal to 4, 3 is equal to 3, 4 is equal to 2, and 5 will be equal to 1. That way, everything is reversed. So yeah, once you have done that, what we're now going to do is we're going to actually highlight this part of the code, and we're going to click on this execute selection. So once we click on that, it should do it all over here, and you should see that some changes have been made to the data. And if you see that, you successfully reverse scored your items. Now for the fun part of this process. When we were talking about reliability in your lectures, one aspect of that is looking at the correlation matrix between your items. Looking at the linear relationships between your items is an important part of determining whether or not they are measuring one thing. So in order to do that, we're going to actually highlight this whole part. And what we're doing is we're running the PW core function, and that is going to run a correlation matrix between all our items, and any correlation that is significant at p is less than 0.05, it's going to star that. So we're going to highlight that, run it, And there it should spit out a nice correlation matrix. Since I had 20 items, it's going to be a pretty big matrix, so it's going to spit it out in parts. But as you can see here, we have a good chunk. Of course, item one is going to correlate perfectly with item one, but as you can see, not all of my correlations are significant, but for those that are, there's a star right next to them. So this is a moderate correlation here, zero point 0.5, sorry, 0.45, and it's significant. Next up, we're going to actually look at the reliability coefficient of our test, and that's going to be with the alpha. So we're going to highlight all this and click on Do. Now, I'm not really sure what this is, but what we're looking for is this table right here. Now, with this table, it will give us the average inter-item correlation, the item rest correlation, item test correlation. This is all stuff we don't need to report in our final paper. What we're interested in is this really very small number at the bottom right corner of this table, 0.76. In the next video, we're going to run through factor analysis and how to actually interpret these results. But for now, just know that this is the number you need to pay attention to when you're reporting your reliability coefficient. All right. And that's actually going to mark the end of this video for now, because well, not tomorrow, but for the next video, what we're going to be doing is running our factor analysis. Then I'll show you how to interpret the scree plot and how to determine how many factors are in your test. And following that, we're actually going to be interpreting the results from the correlation matrix here and the reliability coefficient. I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks.